How's it going, everybody? My name is LuckyBunz, and in today's video we're going to be discussing the incense changes in Pokemon Go. Now before we get started, I would like to encourage all of you to share your thoughts in the comment section down below at any point during this video. This has definitely been quite the heated discussion lately all over the internet, and while most people do dislike these changes, I'm really curious what you all have to say. With that being said though, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, at the beginning of the season of Alola, Niantic decided to actually change how incense work. So this was definitely going to happen at some point, as they previously had mentioned it last year. The execution of this change could have been done in a number of ways, but this is ultimately what they decided to do. So previously the incense were changed to spawn a Pokemon every single minute for a total of 60 minutes. This was an additional buff from what the incense currently were before, which was 30 minutes and then a Pokemon spawns every 5 minutes. Unless you were walking, I think if you were walking you were able to get a Pokemon spawning every minute. It's actually a really specific speed too, like you can't walk too fast and you can't actually go too slow, so your mileage will definitely vary, but overall the general consensus was that you could walk and get 30 Pokemon spawned within that 30-minute incense. But then with the pandemic bonuses, it was changed to 60 minutes, and the Pokemon spawning were going to be guaranteed even if you were stationary to spawn every single minute. Now comparing it to the incense changes that we just got recently, the stationary Pokemon spawns have now gone back to every 5 minutes. But the duration of an incense is actually a little bit longer, so now it's a total of 90 minutes. Now with that being said though, if you are actually moving around and walking at the correct speed, Pokemon should be spawning about every 30 to 60 seconds, which is still pretty solid, and considering that the incense are now longer, you would think that these changes aren't actually that bad. Longer incense, essentially more Pokemon spawns if you're walking at the right speed, but here's the thing. The incense was never for people on the go. I mean, despite that being the original purpose, what this item eventually turned into during the beginning of the 2020 pandemic was an effective way to play from home. Now the argument here is that Pokemon Go is a game where you're supposed to go outside, and I would agree that this game is much better when you get to travel around places to play, but that isn't something that everybody can do. Some people have disabilities, other people have life responsibilities like work or kids, or both, and struggle to find free time to actually get out there and explore. You know, some people, they may make it seem like it's so easy to go out and play Pokemon Go 24/7, but not everybody has that luxury. I would actually say that most people don't have that luxury. Basically what this Incense update did is that it gave a lot of players a way to actually somewhat keep up with the game and participate in the events like Community Day or Spotlight Hours. The Incense buff caused players to do one thing collectively, and that was play the game more, whether they were outside or stuck at home. Remote raid passes were also added into the game during this time, and along with removing the Go Battle League walking requirement, players now actually had an effective way to continue playing the game without having to expose themselves to COVID or even bad weather conditions. Now the interesting thing here is that remote raid passes, as well as the walking requirement for Go Battle League, were not nerfed recently. It was only Incense. Niantic's vision is to basically get people to go outside and explore, right? To interact with others, to create a community aspect. And while this is their goal, I feel like remote raid passes kind of do the opposite of that, because now people just don't go and do raids together anymore. Everyone pretty much remote raid passes for the most part, and this has without a doubt become Niantic's biggest cash cow. Players are able to raid constantly, and the whales in this game do not hold back with their wallets. I saw recently that somebody did 3,000, you heard me right, 3,000 Tapu Koko raids during the initial rotation that it was here for. If we go back to the time before remote raiding was even a thing, there would be no way to actually get this done. Like, you would be crazy enough to get close to 1,000 raids of a specific legendary done during its rotation, but 3,000 from a single player. I mean, that's gotta be a record or something, because I have never ever seen that being done. Honestly, this alone speaks volumes in terms of how much remote raiding has impacted Niantic in terms of its revenue. So yeah, while this technically does defeat Niantic's purpose of going out to explore, they would be fools to actually throw this source of revenue away. Let's go ahead and move on over to our next topic now, which is going to be the recent calm day for Sandslash. Now I honestly feel like many players overlooked these Incense updates in the beginning and just probably didn't even read the update, but were sadly disappointed during the recent calm day for Sandslash. This was a dual calm day with both the Kanto and Alolan versions of Sandslash featured, and you could get both of them in their shiny form, so ideally you would want to get 4 shinies in total, 2 of each, to get the set. Now previously, if you were stuck at work or stuck at home, you could just drop an Incense and it would be the same 3 hours, and you would be able to get a few shinies if you played throughout the day. The number of potential shinies would obviously be lower than somebody who went out and played around lure modules or drove around to cluster spawns, but at the end of the day, you really only needed a few shinies. This was definitely amazing for more casual players of the game, which I would argue is definitely a large majority of the Pokemon Go player base, regardless if you want to see it that way. I've made videos for like over 5 years now, and I think most of my viewers tend to be newer players who cycle through playing and just not playing. While there are definitely a handful of you out there who do watch my videos and are dedicated just as much as I am to this game, I do feel like the majority would skew towards the casual player base. And at the bottom line, the community day was a bust for many of these players, and it kind of left a sour taste in their mouth, rightfully so, because, you know, when it comes down to it, you kind of expect to get a few shinies, but if you're only getting one Pokemon spawning every 5 minutes for a total of, what, 18 spawns in an hour and a half, and that's 36 spawns in the 3 hours you would have the incense running, that is really, really low in terms of your chances for getting a shiny, not including the other spawns you may get around your house, but not everyone has that luxury because spawn points aren't really good in certain areas. And this is compared to the previous 360 spawns you used to get in that 3-hour time window. So yeah, that's kind of a massive difference. Community Day is definitely one of those days where you just get to catch Pokemon and feel happy for scoring a shiny. Whether you're a hardcore player or a casual player, that first shiny always just hits different in my opinion. And nerfing the incense kind of killed that opportunity for many players. Like if you only had 1 to 2 hours to play, do you really think 12 spawns an hour at home is going to get you a shiny? Probably not, especially if you have bad RNG. And I've definitely had those days too. I think my worst one was Magikarp Calm Day, where it took me about 150 spawns to actually get my first shiny. That was pretty bad. Now when it came down to Spotlight Hour, this essentially functioned in the same way. The 1 hour incense was perfect for that duration. You could grab a few spawns wherever you were and hopefully score a shiny, which some people definitely did, despite them being full odds at 1 out of 500. Now of course, if you went out and you grinded cluster spawns, you would have a way better chance of getting a shiny or just stacking up Stardust or whatever the bonus was that day. But at the very least, you could play at home and still get something, right? And I would say that was pretty solid. And this is opposed to the 12 spawns that you would get now from the Incense nerf. So yeah, Incense are basically trash when it comes down to it. Now of course, with that being said, where do we go from here? And is there actually a solution? Unfortunately, I don't feel like there is, and it's not because there hasn't been provided multiple solutions for this. I just feel like Niantic doesn't really care. Like, this isn't on the level of terrible compared to the Hear Us Niantic movement with the increased radius from Pokestops. I feel like that was really, really bad. And I guess you could argue this is probably just as bad, but I don't think we're gonna have as big of a movement for this compared to that. So while the community has spoken up about this, and believe me, I've seen nothing but incense talk for like the past week and a half, it's kind of unlikely that things are going to change. In my honest opinion, I feel like the most constructive way of redesigning the incense would be to shorten the timer down to 30 minutes and make spawns appear every single minute. In addition, also give players the benefit if they're walking around to encounter more rare Pokemon. This incentivizes people to go out and explore more because you're giving them an incentive rather than taking something away. This is definitely the best solution that I've seen people talk about recently, especially for those with a busy work schedule, like myself for example. I'm stuck in tax season right now, guys, and I'm doing like 60 plus hours a week. I mentioned this in my last video. And it's just tough. It's really tough to play during the day. Like sometimes I just miss Spotlight Hours completely because I'm stuck doing work, or I can't really go out on calm days for the full duration of the time anymore because I have to get back to work. It's not easy to do, and sometimes the weather is really terrible too, depending on where you live. Maybe COVID is really bad in your area still. There's a number of reasons that could prevent you from actually going outside to play. And I feel like having a balance of, you know, just being able to get some spawns at home is kind of nice, because at least if I dropped an incense, I could, you know, probably come out with like a few shinies opposed to maybe like the 20, 30 that people are going to get if they go outside to play. And I know people do get more, but you know, the point being is that you're going to get better results if you go outside to play, but at the very least you can still participate at home. Now before I decided to film this video, I actually watched a few different creators' videos on this topic this past week as well, and something that Zoe2Dots said really hit me. Now for those who don't know, she's an Australian YouTuber who's in the creator program for Niantic. I'm sure most of you know who she is, but either way, for those of you who don't, she has direct communication with Niantic. But she actually stated that it kind of feels like talking to a wall sometimes, and at what point does it become a waste of her time to spend, you know, what seems like an hour, you know, typing up a message, making sure it looks good, and sending it to them, ultimately for them to do absolutely nothing. She was just saying how she could better utilize her time to focus more on her community instead of actually spending the time, you know, trying to get through to Niantic. It definitely sucks to see that we as the players can't really give them constructive feedback if possible, unless something drastic happens. Like it literally took the Niantic hear us movement, or hear us Niantic movement, sorry, to get them to acknowledge that the distance radius was a big deal to the player base. And I feel like we're definitely somewhat there on the Incense, like it is constantly being talked about, and it's definitely going to come down to a point again where I feel like mainstream news outlets for gaming are going to start covering the Pokemon Go player base in regards to the Incense changes, and at that point it starts to look bad for people at Niantic. So when that happens, we'll kind of see where we go from there. I don't think they're going to change anything regarding the Incense right now, if I'm being honest. I think we'll have to wait and see what happens, just because this is kind of like an additional change to the season of Alola. They might change it back at the end of the season. So while it's definitely still too early to say what's going to happen, for now just let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and I'll see you all real soon in the next one.